Hello, friends. If you want to watch super hit movie Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1 in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Horizon, an American Saga. Chapter 1, we will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you. I'm also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will watch this movie. Also, we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production, budget, box office collection of this film. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will also give you a small review of the story of this film. Apart from this, we will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so let's start the video. Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1, is a 2024 American epic Western film directed and produced by Kevin Costner from a screenplay he co-wrote with John Baird, based on an original story by the pair and Mark Kasdan. The first installment in the titular film series, it features an ensemble cast of Costner, Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, and Giovanni Ribisi, with Gina Malone, Abby Lee, Michael Rooker, Danny Huston, Luke Wilson, Isabel Fuhrman, Jeff Fahey, Will Patton, Tatanka Means, Owen Crow-Shu, Ella Hunt, and Jamie Campbell-Bower in supporting roles. The film follows several characters navigating life in the Midwestern territories amid the American Civil War. Costner conceived the idea for an epic Western film in 1988, but it languished in development hell for several decades. The film was finally confirmed in January 2022 with Costner as director, with an original plan to shoot the first two films of an envisioned four-film saga back-to-back and release them digitally on HBO Max. Much of the cast signed on in August, with filming beginning that month in Utah and lasting through November. The first two films carry a reported combined budget of $100 million, of which $38 million Costner personally funded. Chapter 1 premiered at the 77th Cannes Film Festival on May 19, 2024, and was theatrically released in the United States on June 28, 2024. The film received mixed reviews from critics and grossed $38.7 million worldwide. The film was filmed back-to-back with a sequel, Chapter 2, which had its world premiere at the 81st Venice International Film Festival and is scheduled to be released at an unspecified date in 2025. Chapter 3 started filming in May 2024, while Chapter 4 is in development. Plot. In 1859, at the San Pedro Valley of southeastern territorial Arizona, two separate parties of surveyors mark stakes on opposite sides of the San Pedro River to outline the homestead lots of a forthcoming frontier town, Horizon. Soon after, Desmarais, a missionary, using a Horizon titled single-page printed pamphlet poster, seeks out Horizon and discovers all three members of the surveying parties dead at the hands of a Western Apache war band. He buries their bodies and establishes the town of Horizon. In 1863, a now American homesteader settled Horizon is set upon by an Apache raid led by Piancene, killing several residents, including the husband and son of Francis Kittredge. A settlement boy, Russell Gans, escapes on horseback during the carnage to alert the army at the nearby Camp Gallant. A detachment of United States Union cavalry and infantry arrives, led by First Lt. Geffert and Sergeant Major Riordan, and Neron Chavez, chief scout in charge of the Pima Indian Scouts. They assist with the burial of the dead, search for the tracks of the raiding party, and help with the survivors. Frances and her daughter Elizabeth leave with the army to seek sanctuary at Camp Gallant. At the same time, the now orphaned Russell joins a posse led by fellow survivor Elias Janney and a scalp hunter tracker to go after the responsible Apaches. Geffert warns the posse of indiscriminate retaliation against other non-combatant, uninvolved natives, driven not by claims of justification, but by scalping profitability. Frances and Elizabeth adjust to life at Camp Gallant. Geffert's non-interventionist moral code regarding indigenous land clashes with his commanding officer, Colonel Houghton, and his ideology of the inevitability of manifest destiny. Elizabeth befriends some of the troops at the post and is heartbroken when they are recalled east to fight in the Civil War. The widow Frances and Geffert begin a romance. Piancene argues with his tribal elder Tuiese over his raids on the settlers. Piancene believes that the settlers will push them out and lead them to war against other tribes, while Tuiese believes in coexistence and considers reprisal for Piancene's actions. Piancene and his war band, including one of Tuiese's sons, voluntarily leave the tribe to continue their war against the settlers. In the Montana Territory, Lucy shoots James Sykes and flees south to Wyoming with her young son Sam. With Sykes wounded, the family matriarch, Mrs. Sykes, orders her other sons to go and recapture her and recover Sam. Now living under the name Ellen Harvey, Lucy marries businessman Walter Childs. The couple cohabitates with Marigold, a prostitute working independently. Marigold propositions horse trader and customer Hayes Ellison before she returns home to care for Sam, while Walter and Lucy depart for one of Walter's felonious gold-rich land sales. Lucy is horrified that the land buyers are actually the pursuing Sykes brothers, Caleb and Junior. Walter is killed by psychopathic Caleb and the men kidnap Lucy. Junior, the eldest brother, sends Caleb to find Sam in town, where he encounters Hayes. They both go to Lucy's home, where Hayes kills Caleb in a shootout when he realizes Caleb is going to kill Marigold. Hayes flees the town with Marigold and Sam. Settling in a railroad work camp, Marigold abandons Sam and Hayes for a traveling gambler who offers her a life with security. She leaves the child in the care of a Chinese worker's family. A wagon train led by Matthew Van Weyden treks the Santa Fe Trail to Horizon. Among the group is the pretentious British couple Juliet Chesney and Hugh Proctor. It also includes the extended family of Frances' late husband. As they travel, they are watched by a pair of Pawnee warriors scouting the wagon train, causing them to slow their progress and prepare to defend themselves. During the night, Juliet catches two men peeping at her as she bathes in the drinking water. Van Weyden must warn the two away from the couple, but neither appears to intend to listen. At a trading post, Janny learns that the responsible Apache is Piancene. Janny and Russell's less scrupulous fellow posse members encounter and try to intimidate an indigenous man, but Janny and the trader de-escalate it from turning into a bloodbath. Due to the lack of results in finding Piancene's band, the group decides to go after any Indians wherever they can find them. They learn of a Tonto Apache village nearby and wait for the village's hunting party to depart before massacring and scalping the women, children, and elderly of the tribe to Russell's horror. The posse rides away, leaving before the hunters can return to take their revenge, with the consequences of their action soon to show across the land. Cast: Kevin Costner as Hayes Ellison, Sienna Miller as Frances Kittredge, Sam Worthington as First Lt. Trent Geffert, Giovanni Ribisi as H. Silas Pickering, Michael Rooker as Sergeant Major Thomas Riordan, Danny Houston as Carl Albert Houghton, Jenna Malone as Ellen Harvey Lucy, Michael Angarano as Walter Childs, Abby Lee as Marigold, Jamie Campbell Bower as Caleb Sykes, John Beavers as Junior Sykes, Owen Crowshoe as Piancene, Tanka Means as Taklishim, Luke Wilson as Matthew Van Weyden, Ella Hunt as Juliet Chesney, Tom Payne as Hugh Proctor, Georgia McPhail as Elizabeth Kittredge, Will Patton as Owen Kittredge, Isabel Furman as Diamond Kittredge, Jeff Fahey as Tracker, Gregory Cruz as Tuiese, Scott Hayes as Elias Janney, Angus McFadden as Desmarais, Etienne Kellysi as Russell Gans, Charles Hafford as James Sykes, Dale Dickey as Mrs. Sykes, Waza Chief as Leluye, Elizabeth Dennehy as Mrs. Riordan, Hayes Costner as Nathaniel Kittredge, Alejandro Eda as Neron Chavez, Tim Genny as James Kittredge, Colin Cunningham as Chisholm, James Russo as Abel Naughton, Douglas Smith as Sig, Larry Bagby as Billy Landry, Flag James, James Landry Habert as Flag, Dalton Baker as Private Epps, Chase Ramsey as Private Eklund, Naomi Wonders as Martha Kittredge, Austin Archer as Virgil, Rainer Shine as Hermit, David O'Hara as Bowler Hat Surveyor. Production: Kevin Costner first commissioned Horizon as a single small-scale film in 1988 and later approached Walt Disney Studios with the project after the release of his 2003 film Open Range. The film almost entered production, but he and Disney were $5 million apart on the budget and plans were scrapped. He returned to the script in 2012, rewriting it with John Baird as 4 larger films. It was announced in January 2022 that Costner was set to direct and produce the film, a passion project for him, in addition to starring. It began casting in February. In April, Warner Bros. Pictures and New Line Cinema joined the production to distribute with the film set to be released on the then-named HBO Max streaming service before being moved to a theatrical release. In a June interview, Costner stated he plans to make 4 movies out of the premise and was looking to cast over 170 speaking roles. In order to get the films made, Costner spent $38 million of his own money. In August, Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, Jamie Campbell Bower, Luke Wilson, Thomas Hayden Church, Gina Malone, Alejandro Etta, Tatanka Means, and Michael Rooker were cast in the film. Sabel Furman, Ella Hunt, Jeff Fahey, and Tom Payne would be among the numerous casting announcements made throughout September 18, 2021. In October, Will Patton, Owen Crow-Shue, and Danny Huston were added to the cast, 23. Filming of at least the first installment began on August 29, 2022, in southern Utah, 14, concluding in November. Filming of the second installment began by May 2023, 26, before concluding in the summer of that year. Release. In a May 2023 interview, Costner expressed hope to have the first film released by fall 2023. In October, it was announced the film would release in 2 parts, with Chapter 1 releasing on June 28, 2024, and Chapter 2 on August 16, 2024. Later that month, it was announced that K5 International, the recently relaunched international sales arm of K5 Media Group, would handle international sales on the film at the American film market. In April 2024, it was announced that the first part would premiere out of competition at the Cannes Film Festival on May 19, 2024, where it received a 9-minute standing ovation at the Grand Théâtre Lumière. Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1 debuted on digital platforms via premium video on demand on July 16, 2024. On August 16, 2024, it was announced that Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1 would begin streaming on Max on August 23, 2024. The film played at the 81st Venice International Film Festival, prior to the world premiere of Chapter 2 on September 7, 2024. Ception. Box office. Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1 grossed $29 million in the United States and Canada and $9.7 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $38.7 million. In the United States and Canada, Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1 was released alongside A Quiet Place, Day 1, and was projected to gross $10–15 million from 3,334 theaters in its opening weekend. The film made $4.1 million on its first day, including $800,000 from Thursday night previews. It went on to debut to $11 million, finishing in third behind Inside Out 2 and A Quiet Place Day 1. In its second weekend, the film made $5.4 million, a drop of 51%, finishing in sixth. Losing nearly 750 theaters in its third weekend, the film made $2.4 million, finishing in seventh. Critical response. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 51% of 156 critics' reviews are positive, with an average rating of 5.7/10. The website's consensus reads, Kevin Costner doesn't lack for ambition as he sketches this frontier saga across the widest of canvases, but Horizon's first chapter proves too diffuse in scope for it to satisfy as a self-contained endeavor. Metacritic, which uses a weighted average, assigned the film a score of 49 out of 100 based on 47 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale. Bill J. Beery of Vulture gave a reservedly positive review, likening its incomplete nature to the 2021 film Dune Part 1 and stating that its stately pace never feels boring, so it doesn't feel like it should have been shorter, but it also doesn't really work on its own, and it feels impossible to judge this film because in some weird way, it doesn't feel like anything has really happened yet. A review at RogerEbert.com wrote, Even with the cataclysmic scenes of death, the first hour does little to endear these characters. They're disparate people whose connections aren't immediately clear and only become vaguely obvious toward the picture's conclusion. And further noted, while the first film in the Possible Horizon series does well in setting up future pictures, continuing the momentum Costner gained before he left Yellowstone, this single film is a chore to sit through. It rarely gives viewers what they want, seeing Costner on the open range. It gives us few memorable characters outside of Costner. I can't remember the name of a single figure without looking at my notes. Forbes was more positive and found the film had a great sense of place, while The Guardian found the film was an unapologetically old-school Western. The BBC website was very critical and described the film as a non-film. It's like the tantalizing pilot episode of a television series, but a pilot episode that drags on and on for 3 hours. A mixed review in Esquire, however, expressed hope about the sequels. Addressing the duration and the serialization of the film, Owen Gleiberman of Variety adopted the opposite approach. Yet I think the idea is that the design of it all will come into focus as we see Horizon and American Saga, Chapter 2, later this summer, and then at some point Chapter 3, which is now scheduled, and maybe if all goes according to plan, more chapters. I seriously hope not. I'm not sure how much juice there is to squeeze out of these characters, but even if there is some, I don't want to see movies turn into television. Just about every Western of the studio era came in at 2 hours or less, and so did most of the revisionist Westerns, and some of those were complicated. There's a reason for that. It's all the time they needed. Richard Brody of The New Yorker gave the film a negative review, writing that the inflated production of Horizon shows in its aesthetic. The dramatic format seems borrowed from television, with multiple threads jumpily interweaved to ward off impatience. With so many balls in the air at once, the movie lacks the kind of patient observation that this story demands. Accolade. The movie was nominated in the category of Outstanding Supporting Visual Effects in a Photoreal Feature at the 23rd Visual Effects Society Awards. Sequel. Main article Horizon and American Saga, Chapter 2. In June 2022, Costner stated he plans to make 4 Horizon films in total, shot back-to-back. In November 2022, Costner confirmed that the first film had been completed and that the second had been greenlit, set to be filmed in spring 2023, 48. Production for the second film commenced in April 2023, with Glynn Turman, Kathleen Quinlan, and Giovanni Ribasi joining Costner, Miller, Worthington, Hunt, Patton, Wilson, Furman, and Hayden Church, who continued on from the first film. Director of Photography J. Michael Muro, production designer Derek R. Hill, editor Miklos Wright, and costume designer Lisa Lovas would also return. The second film finished production in summer 2023, with the production of the third film being paused because of the 2023 Hollywood strikes. Main article Horizon and American Saga, Chapter 3. In May 2024, casting calls for background actors had commenced, while production was slated to begin later that month in St. George, Utah. Later, it was reported that production initially commenced in 2023 before progress halted in part due to the Hollywood strikes. 1 month following the completion of the previous installment, Costner began filming a montage sequence that features scenes from Chapter 3. Costner stated that principal photography commenced on May 13, 2024, explaining that production had initially been planned to. In June 2024, Costner stated that Giovanni Ribisi's character, H. Silas Pickering, appeared in the ending montage of the first film as a way to tease what's next in the saga, while saying that H. Silas Pickering will be a supporting character in the next film, but will become a main character in the third and fourth films, potentially as the villain of the saga. Horizon, an American Saga, is a film series of 4 planned American epic westerns. It is directed, co-written, produced by, and starring Kevin Costner, from a script he co-wrote with John Baird and based on an original story co-written by Costner, Baird, and Mark Kasdan. The plot centers on fictional characters and takes place in pre- and post-Civil War America and details the exploration of the American West. Depicting a 12-year span, The films feature an ensemble cast portraying various characters and their experiences pioneering into new territory from their homes. Development. Kevin Costner began developing the script for the film series in 1988, which he based on his personal belief that its viewers should be inspired by the true history of America in the Old West. Over the years, Costner continued to develop the script from originally co-starring two lead actors to featuring a complete ensemble cast. Costner explained that by further expanding the script into a series of 4 individual films, he wanted to accurately depict a 12-year history of the United States, including the impact of the American Civil War, and drawing an audience into the movie-going experience. Costner explained that the plot depicts the experiences of Native Americans when immigrant settlers moved into their territory with a justification that they had paid European salesmen for the land. In 2003, Costner negotiated production with the Walt Disney Company. During pre-production, however, he discovered that the studio lacked his required production budget, so he abandoned the Disney brand. In 2014, he expanded the series into a trilogy. Development continued over the years until Costner collaborated with John Baird on the script in 2012, where it developed into 4 separate films, he contents and story of which would intentionally be darker than his previous westerns. Lacking major production studio initial involvement, Costner invested $38 million of his own money into the budget, with additional funding supplied by 2 unnamed investors, and became determined to begin production as quickly as possible. In May 2024, Costner confirmed that the Horizon film series will be at least 4 installments, while explaining that the production and release schedule of the first 2 films was in part due to his personal desire to see the script realized in his lifetime. He wanted to ensure that his son Hayes could play the character he had written for him before outgrowing the part. Later, Costner detailed the various events in his life which had delayed the realization of the films, including the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on cinema, the death of his parents in 2021, scheduling conflicts including a contract dispute with Paramount Pictures and Taylor Sheridan on the final season of Yellowstone, a divorce with Christine Baumgartner, and the writers-actors strikes of 2023. He was determined to work to get this thing finished. Contrary to some reports, Costner rejected the idea that the development of the film series directly influenced his departure from the Yellowstone television series. He explained that the final season had been restructured multiple times and was subjected to various production delays, which conflicted with the production schedule on the prioritized film series. Citing an example with the lack of completed scripts for a last season, which would be split into 2 separate parts, Costner stated that he is open to completing additional photography to finish his role in the series. However, the filmmaker stated that when rewrites for the show were ongoing, he allowed Sheridan to read the script for the Horizon films with hopes that it could inspire, while previously offering to provide assistance in writing his character out of Yellowstone in a climactic death scene. He reportedly offered to give some time off from his film's production schedule to do so, but these options have never materialized. When addressing the various festival debuts of each installment, Cannes Film Festival for Chapter 1 and Venice Film Festival for Chapter 2, Costner expressed interest in returning to Cannes for Chapter 3. He later explained plans for additional monetary gains through licensing the series every several years through streaming and home video, regardless of their box office performance. Working with Warner Bros., plans are for each chapter to be released 4 to 6 months after the previous installment. The filmmaker later stated that he developed the series of films with the quality of classic westerns in mind, and though he has considered developing additional sequels set during contemporary times, Costner determined that the series will end with Chapter 4, expressing hopes that families will go to theaters together to view each installment upon their release. In January 2022, it was announced that Kevin Costner would direct his 4th feature film from a script he co-wrote with John Baird. Costner is producer, with principal photography scheduled in August 2022 in Utah. This is a joint venture production between Territory Pictures, Warner Bros. Pictures, and New Line Cinema, and Warner Bros. Is distributor. In June 2022, he stated that filming in the state has long been his goal, with scouting in the state already having taken place. Later that month, Costner revealed that his project had evolved into 4 different films that all connect, so you're watching a saga of storylines. Production was in the casting phase of pre-production, with photography scheduled to start later that year. Each film is intended to be 2 hours and 45 minutes in length, and Costner stated that once all the films are released, they will be compiled and re-released as a miniseries on television. Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, Jamie Campbell Bower, Luke Wilson, Thomas Hayden Church, Gina Malone, Alejandro Eda, Taranka Means, and Michael Rooker have been cast in various roles in the film series. In September 2022, Isabel Fuhrman was cast in an undisclosed role. By November of that year, principal photography had wrapped. In May 2024, it was revealed that the Writers Guild of America had awarded credits for the first 2 films to Costner and John Baird as screenwriters from an original story co-written by Costner, Baird, and Mark Kasdan. In October 2023, the official title was announced as Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 1. The first trailer debuted, revealing a June 28, 2024 release date. Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 2, 2025. Main article: Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 2. Filming began in April 2023, with Glynn Turman, Kathleen Quinlan, and Giovanni Ribisi joining the cast. Costner, Miller, Worthington, Ella Hunt, Will Patton, Wilson, Fuhrman, and Church reprised their roles from the previous film. The director of photography and editor returned from the previous film, 19. Production on the second film commenced concurrently with the third in Utah by May 2023. In June 2023, Fuhrman confirmed that series production would be conducted back-to-back. 1 month following the completing of principal photography, Costner began filming the montage sequence that will feature at the end of the film to provide insight into the events of Chapter 3. In October 2023, the first trailer debuted with the film's official title reveal. Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 2, which was originally set to be scheduled for an August 16, 2024 release. However, due to the box office disappointment of Chapter 1, it was announced that the release date of this film had been indefinitely delayed until further notice. Chapter 2 had its world premiere at the 81st Venice International Film Festival on September 7, 2024. The film premiered in the U.S. at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival on February 7, 2025. Horizon: American Saga, Chapter 3. Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 3. Production on the third film commenced concurrently with the second in Utah by May 2023. Production of the third film was paused due to the writers' and the actors' strike. In October of the same year, following the debut of the trailer and poster for Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, it was confirmed that work on the sequels is ongoing. In February 2024, amid post-production on the first 2 installments, Costner commenced building a new production company named Territory Film Studios in Utah. Production on the third and fourth film will begin later that year. By April, Costner confirmed that the scripts are complete for the 4 separate films. In May 2024, casting calls for background actors had commenced, while production was slated to begin later that month in St. George, Utah. Later, production started in 2023, halting in part due to the writer and actor strikes. 1 month following the completion of the previous installment, Costner began filming a montage sequence that features scenes from Chapter 3. Costner stated that principal photography commenced on May 13, 2024, explaining that production had been planned to commence on April 25th and was moved to May 6 to accommodate funding. In August 2024, the filmmaker stated that though the first installment underperformed at the box office, production will be completed in early 2025. At the 2024 Venice Film Festival, Costner told reporters, "I don't know how I'm going to make Chapter 3 right now, but I'm going to make it." Horizon: An American Saga, Chapter 4. Following completion of the previous installments, production will begin on the fourth film. In February 2024, it was announced that principal photography would start in Utah concurrently with the third film later that year. By April of the same year, Costner announced that the scripts are completed for each installment of the film series. 1. In August 2024, the filmmaker stated that he intends to complete production on the film in spring of 2025, immediately following the completion of filming for Chapter 3. Principal cast and characters. List indicators. This section includes characters who will appear or have appeared in more than 2 films in the series. An empty gray cell indicates the character was not in the film or that the character's official presence has not yet been confirmed. C indicates a cameo role. V indicates a voice-only role. Horizon, an American Saga, is the first in Kevin Costner's 4-movie Western epic, a quartet I hope the filmmaker and star completes. I genuinely enjoyed the sprawling 3-hour film, though it has some issues that I wish Costner had avoided in his opening salvo, which needed to win big with audiences and critics and has failed on both counts. The movie is currently at a pretty dispiriting 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, 69% with audiences, and is looking like a box office flop. The movie probably would have been better, or at least more accessible and appealing, with a shorter runtime and at least 1 fewer plot lines. As it stands, the 3-hour film is a loosely tied-together batch of what almost feels like 3 separate movies, with very little connective tissue weaving them into a cohesive whole. One of these only pops up about 2/3 of the way through the picture, a wagon trail storyline centered on Luke Wilson's character, Matthew Van Weyden. I wish Costner had saved it for Chapter 2, not because it's bad, but because it feels like a distraction from the other 2 main stories. The first of these takes place at the fledgling settlement of Horizon, built on the banks of a river in Apache country. The indigenous people resent the white settlers, who take their land and drive away the game. A large portion of the early part of the movie involves a brutal Apache raid on the settlers. Then this story splits in 2, with some of our main character heading to a nearby military outpost and others setting off with bounty hunters out for revenge and Indian scalps. Frances Kittredge, Sienna Miller, and her daughter Elizabeth, Georgia McPhail, are taken to safety by Sergeant Thomas Riordan, Michael Rooker, and Lieutenant Trent Geffart, Sam Worthington. Young Russell Gans, Etienne Kellyse, heads off with the bounty hunters. A good portion of this storyline also revolves around the Apache themselves, with the young warlike Pioncinay, Owen Crowshoe, determined to kill the settlers and drive them away against the wishes of his father. While the Native Americans in the film are handled with nuance and respect, they still play a relatively minor role compared to the white settlers. A second main storyline follows a woman who calls herself Ellen, Gina Malone, who escapes her abusive husband and takes her child south from Montana Territory into Wyoming Territory. This is where Kevin Costner's character, a horse trader named Hayes Ellison, comes into the picture, as well as Marigold, Abby Lee, a prostitute who gets caught up in the violence that follows as Ellen's pursuers catch up with her and her young son. These are the Sykes brothers, Caleb, Jamie Campbell Bower, who you may know as Vecna from Stranger Things, and his older, larger sibling, Junior, John Beavers. I won't go into more detail on either of these main plot lines, but there was enough material between the 2 of them to fill an entire movie without the addition of a wagon train and a third cast of characters to keep track of on their journey west. With none of the 3 stories converging and all ending without any real conclusion, the film feels less like a complete movie and more like an introduction, or the first 3 episodes of a miniseries. The most bizarre part about it, however, is the ending. Instead of ending like a normal movie, it simply goes directly into an extended montage, basically a trailer of what's coming in Chapter 2. There's nothing to denote this. There's no "the end. Let us know this film is done." Even knowing this was the first of 4 movies, I found myself a little confused. Were these shots a montage showing us what happens between this film and the next? Was this a trailer? I'm sure if I went to this blind instead of pretty well informed, I'd be completely baffled. An odd choice to be sure. Still, I really loved most of this movie. It's gorgeous, for one thing. I wish I'd been able to see it on a bigger screen. I'd love to see it on an IMAX screen, though I don't think it was released on IMAX. Cinematographer J. Michael Muro, who worked with Costner on his previous Western, Open Range, does incredible work capturing the beauty and grandeur of the American Southwest. This is all shot in my backyard. I live in northern Arizona, and the filming primarily took place in southern Utah, and I loved seeing the canyonlands and mesas, the mountainsides golden with aspen groves. The score, composed by John Debney, does a great job hearkening back to classic westerns, and while it's not the most memorable, it captures that same sweeping sense of Americana. It's not a perfect film, and the pacing and editing at times can feel a bit jarring, with time jumps that leave too much out, rushing certain stories because even with 3 hours, there is simply too much going on, too many characters, and too many different stories to possibly keep track of everything, let alone develop every thread into something like what you'd expect in a Western, or really any film. I think Costner made a pretty big error not tightening it up and releasing something shorter and more structured, because I think the length and pacing will turn a lot of people off. I was never personally bored, but I bet a lot of people will be. I found it tense, exciting, romantic, even poetic at times, and with a surprising amount of humor. It's just messy, and I can't help but think it would be better suited as a 12-episode premium TV series. I'm glad it's not, simply because I'm happy I get to see it in theaters. The movie has a great sense of place, with its sweeping vistas and distinct locations, but it has a terrible sense of time, and that plus the fact that nothing is resolved and none of these characters ever cross paths make it feel very incomplete. And that's fine. It is incomplete, but as an opening salvo, I think Costner and his collaborators needed to hit a bullseye. Costner spent $38 million of his own money on this project so far. I genuinely hope he can raise enough money to finish all 4 films. Chapter 2 releases this August, and this reviewer will be there on opening night. Let me know your thoughts on Horizon, An American Saga, and all your favorite movies on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Also be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me here on this blog. You can also sign up for my newsletter. Expecting a proudly classical, old-fashioned Western to be anything other than polarizing in our modern movie climate is a bit naive. And I say that as someone who didn't initially consider the landscape when reading the first wave of reactions to Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1, the first big-screen installment in Kevin Costner's decades-in-the-making multi-film passion project. It only required a little thought for me to understand many of the responses that should have been easy to predict. Truth be told, classic westerns have, unfortunately, fallen out of fashion, and over the years, tastes have changed dramatically. Today, many people trend towards social realistic dramas, pseudo-arthouse edginess, and low-budget horror, occasionally cleansing their palates with a big studio blockbuster. So when something like Horizon comes along, it shouldn't surprise us that it doesn't resonate with everyone. And that's perfectly fine. But some of the shots taken at it have been petty and disingenuous, such as labeling it a vanity project, or the cries of nepotism because he cast his son in a small role. My advice, toss all of those things aside. Horizon, An American Saga is clearly near and dear to Costner's heart, which is a big reason he is personally bankrolling a huge portion of the films, and you can see his passion in nearly every second of this vast, immersive, and handsomely shot frontier epic. As this first chapter clearly shows, the Horizon Saga isn't your prototypical narrative-driven movie. As Costner himself has put it, it's a journey, not a plot movie, and some people may struggle with that. But having his intentions in mind, along with a grasp of his audacious, multifaceted vision going forward, energizes Chapter 1 and helps set the table for something that could be truly magnificent. Make no mistake, there is a lot of introduction and table setting in Chapter 1, and all of it is building towards the release of Chapter 2, which comes to theaters this August. Again, it is unquestionably unconventional, but it works extremely well, mainly due to the attention Costner gives to the several main characters and their uniquely personal storylines. While Costner himself gets top billing, his character, Hayes Ellison, is only one piece of this amazing character-driven tapestry. With Horizon, Costner sets out to give us a broad look at the American West through a variety of frontier experiences across Kansas, Wyoming, Montana, and other captivating territories. Written for the screen by Costner and author John Baird, the individual stories each have surprising depth and a dramatic heft that not only grabs your interest, but leaves you looking forward to what lies ahead. And while Costner proudly embraces the grand old-fashioned vistas and classic Western flavor, it's impossible to put his film in such a tiny box. That's because he takes a nuanced look at frontier life. Anything perceived as romanticizing the Old West is often countered by the realities of violence and savagery, and he doesn't sugarcoat the numerous themes he unearths, such as freedom, morality, justice, grief, family, greed, and retribution, just to name a few. Among the key characters we encounter is Costner's Hayes Ellison, a former gunslinger who finds himself at odds with the thuggish Sykes family and their matriarch, played by the always compelling Dale Dickey. He and a prostitute with a heart of gold named, go figure, Marigold Abby Lee, head to the mountains in hopes of avoiding a conflict with the Sykes bunch. Elsewhere in the film's most harrowing sequence, Frances Kittredge, a standout Sienna Miller, and her daughter Lizzie, Georgia McPhail, barely survive a massacre of their settlement by an Apache war party. They're taken in by the United States Cavalry, where she takes a liking to Lieutenant Trent Geffart, Sam Worthington. We also meet members of a wagon train driven by their reluctant leader, Matthew Van Weyden, Luke Wilson. And we follow a young boy thirsty for revenge after his family is murdered. A series of unfortunate events puts him in the company of a brutal gang of killers butchering natives for profit. An incredible ensemble not only brings these stories to life, but they also introduce personal stories within the stories. Admittedly, it's a lot to keep up with, but it's worth the effort, in large part thanks to the superb performances from the main stars and sturdy reliables like Michael Rooker, Danny Huston, and Will Patton. Add in Costner's bold and ambitious vision that trusts in his audience's ability to understand what he's going for, as well as their willingness to go along on the journey. I know I'm ready. Horizon, An American Saga Chapter 1 is in theaters now. You have to admire the dedication to the craft. Kevin Costner, who directs, co-writes, and stars in Horizon, clearly wanted to tell this story, so much so that he put up his own money to finance and market the film, which is the first in an original series, something of a rarity these days and part of the reason I was so interested in it. Despite a standing ovation at the Cannes Film Festival, Horizon Chapter 1 didn't do so well with critics, causing the $100 million film to debut with around $11 million. Considering Costner put up a lot of his own money in the project, that's got to hurt. But I was curious nonetheless and went to see it, and you know what? To call Horizon an epic would definitely be an understatement. This is part 1 in a planned 4-part series, with Chapter 2 due in August, while the third entry is currently a few days into filming, which does make its prospects of completion that much more dour, as Warner Bros. Hasn't inked a distribution deal for Chapter 3. It has a sprawling ensemble cast, telling stories across many states during the mid-19th century. The cast includes the likes of Costner, who only shows up an hour into the movie, Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, Luke Wilson, Michael Rooker, Abby Lee, Danny Huston, Jamie Campbell Bower, and Jenna Malone, among many others. Stories include the settlers of the Camp of Horizon, a wagon train, Army personnel at a fort, the divided Apache tribe, mishaps at a mining town, and more. So yes, this is a very jam-packed movie, and it is only really a part of a movie. Most of these arcs get no real conclusion as we await further stories. This leads itself to the biggest issue and obstacle in Horizon's path. This really should have been an HBO series. It feels like an episode of television, but stretched into 3 hours, with at least 6 more hours to come, I would imagine. Collectively, that would make up a whole season of TV. It is great to see these kinds of movies on the big screen. Don't get me wrong, the cinematography is stellar and fills up the screen in a way that can't be replicated on a TV screen. But the way the movie is assembled leads me to think streaming may have been a better call in the end. What did surprise me with Horizon, all that being said, is the overall tone of the series. If you were expecting something like 1883, you may be surprised to learn that this film feels more in line with the big studio westerns of the 1960s. The excellent score by John Debney definitely reminded me of Elmer Bernstein more than a few times, and the overall vibe is more Shane than it is Once Upon a Time in the West. The trailers definitely made the movie feel like it was going to be gritter and gritty. It still is, don't get me wrong, but there's a more classical approach to this film in terms of its tone and scope, and one that felt oddly refreshing in a way. I was also never bored with the film, which, considering its runtime, is a big win. By the nature of its multi-film narrative, some of the stories in Horizon end up working better than others. Sienna Miller's role as a recent widow after her home was burned down in an attack on the Horizon settlement is one of the stronger arcs in the film, while Luke Wilson's wagon train, which is introduced roughly 2 hours into the film, does feel like a random last-minute addition that at this point is far too disconnected from anything to be meaningful. It also has the least amount of screen time and resolution, making me wonder if this should have been added in Chapter 2, and if the plot lines already established should have just been extended in this entry. There's also a few scenes here and there that felt like they could have been trimmed or cut entirely to ease the 3-hour runtime. Who knows? My opinion on the cut may change once future installments cut out, but basing Chapter 1 solely on its own, that was a takeaway. Thankfully, despite the inconsistent stories, all the actors involved are fully committed. No one phones it in, but shout out to Miller and Campbell-Bower for being standouts in such a stacked ensemble. Miller's recent widow finds herself striking up a romance with Sam Worthington's lieutenant at the local fort, while Campbell-Bower is a sadistic criminal on the hunt. Costner adds screen time for the Apache tribe as well, but they do end up feeling more like a plot device rather than core characters. There's potential, with the tribe being divided on how to tackle the encroaching white eyes on their land, but it's not explored enough to be impactful. But once again, this may change down the line. But the best thing I can say about Horizon, despite its faults, is that if Chapter 2 was playing right now, I'd still go and see it on the big screen. Costner is arguably a better director than he is an actor, and he's clearly put a lot of love and dedication into this passion project. There may be a lot of hubris involved in the making of Horizon, but this feels like one of those movies they just don't make anymore. So I'd say if you're a fan of westerns and/or older Hollywood-style filmmaking, give this one a go and bear in mind it's not a complete whole, so don't expect any closure or resolution. Over 60 years ago, directors Henry Hathaway, John Ford, and George Marshall joined forces to tell the story of America's push toward the Pacific. How the West was won was a tremendous undertaking. Produced through the 3-strip Cinerama process, it featured a deep ensemble of high-wattage stars: James Stewart, Spencer Tracy, John Wayne, Gregory Peck, Henry Fonda, Thelma Ritter, and many, many more, and a canvas that seemingly stretched further than the country itself. Its story is one of white perseverance to conquer the land, the people already inhabiting it, and each other. It suffers from its grand scale, competing visions, and regressive politics. And yet there is a mystique to the very audacity of attempting it. For actor Kevin Costner, the film must surely have been at the forefront of his mind while making his ambitious directorial return. Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1, a 3-hour work attempting to rewrite past wrongs while suffering from the same glut that afflicted the film it most recalls. Horizon isn't trying to subvert the Western, relying on many well-worn tropes. It's also a slow build of intersecting stories that takes so long to get going that Costner doesn't even appear on screen until an hour in. Instead, the first third of Horizon is merely a long preamble, a structural decision indicative of a film grinding and failing to prove itself as a standalone feature. The sizzle reel that ends Chapter 1, in fact, featuring a library of clips and characters for future movies, does well to tease the kind of high-motoring film we could get, but don't necessarily find here. Rather, Chapter 1 limps into 1859 in San Pedro Valley. A family surveying a plot of land by a creek is gruesomely murdered by Apache warriors who are none too happy to find white outsiders on their land. These deaths, however, do little to deter more from coming to the point of settling in a town guarded by armed citizens. At nightfall, during a town dance, the Apache warriors return. The grisly, vicious massacre, backgrounded by rumbling flames and deafening screams, is frankly edited and bluntly composed to the point that it feels as normalized as breathing. A few of the townsfolk survive. Some decide to hunt down their attackers in a bid for revenge. Others, like Lizzie, Georgia McPhail, and her mother Frances, Sienna Miller, leave with the Union Army led by Lieutenant Trent Geffart, Sam Worthington, to the relative safety of a fort. Even with the cataclysmic scenes of death, the first hour does little to endear these characters. They're disparate people whose connections aren't immediately clear and only become vaguely obvious toward the picture's conclusion. Before long, we're whisked away to the Wyoming Territory and introduced to some brand new characters. Costner finally appears as Hayes Ellison, a horse trader, among many other skills. He befriends local sex worker Marigold, a creaky Abby Lee, who is hunted by a band of gunmen because of a secret she's hiding. The series gains a minor pulse once Costner, featuring a gruff, low voice, appears on screen. But even when he does appear, he feels like an afterthought, as though Costner, the filmmaker and writer, he co-wrote the script with John Baird, knows how tall of a task he has introducing all of his main players. Consequently, the power of his presence is left limited to the film's detriment. The final arc, introduced in the final hour, is the high point. It involves a wagon train making its way with an unlikely cast of characters through the Montana Territory. Luke Wilson, the head of this traveling group, is the strongest actor in this cast, too. He is more than a shadow of a Western archetype, imbuing Matthew Van Weyden with a groundedness that the series sorely lacks. Because as much as Costner tries to play an even hand, attempting to give the indigenous and settler perspective equal attention, it doesn't wholly work. Yes, we meet the family of the Apache warriors, but their screen time pales in comparison to their white counterparts. It also doesn't help that the white women characters are, for the most part, so clean and luminous, nary a speck of dust on them despite their grungy surroundings, that they appear angelic on screen. The score is equally telling. It's a gorgeous, big, triumphant old Hollywood score whose most sympathetic notes are reserved for the film's white characters. Costner does at least include a diverse cast, nodding toward the presence of black people and Chinese immigrants in the history of the West, tracing across the vast, sumptuously photographed landscape by D.P. J. Michael Muro. While Horizon teases a kind of conspiracy theory, a mysterious publisher is printing and sending pamphlets promising a land of milk of honey that is only occupied by death, I can't help but continue to think about the film in relation to how the West was won. That Western, ultimately, couldn't overcome the weight of the era it was created in, or genre conventions like forced, feeble romances. Horizon is arriving in a more enlightened time, especially considering the release of Martin Scorsese's Killer of the Flower Moon, and other indigenous-made works, such as Reservation Dogs, Wild Indian, The Body Remembers When the World Broken Open, Beans, and more. That presence put even greater pressure on Costner. And so far, he hasn't completely overcome being the director of Dances with Wolves. That filmmaker, for better or for worse, still exists here in every corner of this epic picture. While the first film in the possible Horizon series does well in setting up future pictures, continuing the momentum Costner gained before he left Yellowstone, this single film is a chore to sit through. It rarely gives viewers what they want, seeing Costner on the open range. It gives us few memorable characters outside of Costner. I can't remember the name of a single figure without looking at my notes. It feels like a debilitating mistake to bank on possible future films to land the entire concept. Horizon keeps far too many of the best bits far out of reach. The weighty first installment of Kevin Costner's Western mega-epic, this is unapologetically old school in its approach. The colors, clay reds and the glistening gold of Sienna Miller's suspiciously well-washed hair, practically sing from the frame. The score is stirring and self-important. The Native Americans are neatly divided into the ruthless killers intent on exterminating the settlers and those who take what the film frames as the reasonable approach of appeasement and cooperation with the white folk. This is the kind of handsome, well-nourished filmmaking that looks an absolute treat up on the screen, but is about as authentically Old West as a set of dental veneers. Still, it's not uninvolving. The picture takes its own sweet time getting going, but a satisfying momentum builds through the multiple, interlinked storylines. Honestly, I think the more colons you add to your film's title, the less likely that it will be a success. You might get away with one, but two are going to kill your project stone dead. Kevin Costner's Horizon: An American Saga Chapter 1 seemed a guaranteed recipe for commercial disaster, and indeed its abortive theatrical release appears to bear this out, asking audiences in 2024 to come watch a 3-hour Western that openly only covers 1/4 of a 4-film narrative in competition with the vast panoply of streaming services was at best hopelessly optimistic. As the dust settles, 2 films complete, a third shot but unedited, and the finale only existing on paper, Kevin Costner is once again reminded that the difference between visionary masterpiece and costly vanity project is the box office return. I think there is a canon of great Western stars, and that Kevin Costner sits within it. He is arguably the first major addition to it since Eastwood, carving himself a reputation for strong, well-acted revisionist takes on the genre, despite its overall decline as mainstream entertainment. Dances with Wolves, 1990, was a bona fide masterpiece, and his 2003 follow-up Open Range came damn close. Even his post-apocalyptic spin on the genre, The Postman, 1997, had a lot more merit than audiences and critics believed at the time. Through television projects like Hatfields and McCoy's 2012 and Yellowstone 2018-24, he has continued to maintain his reputation. It is clear that the success of Yellowstone led to a belief its large global audience would follow him into cinemas. That was not to be the case. The most frustrating part of watching Horizon is that, if anything, it feels like watching the first 3 episodes of a prestige serial from HBO or Netflix. It jumps back and forth between a series of as yet unconnected storylines and does not conclude so much as stop. What initially seems a rushed montage turns out to be an extended teaser for the second installment. There is certainly a strong beginning to the film and plenty of middle, but there is literally no end to be had. If reviewed as an ordinary film, Horizon would fare very poorly indeed. Yet, this is not an ordinary film. This is an honest attempt to bring the long-form story structure of television into movie theaters. While it has been done with literary adaptations several times before, notably with Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy, it's an uncommon sight indeed to see it done with original material. Much of the film, such as it is properly outstanding stuff. The acting is almost uniformly superb. The cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. The scope of the thing is enormous. If there is a focus to the piece, it is the frontier community of Horizon, set up in a prologue on Apache territory and leading to the killing of its founders. Sometime later, and a larger township has been established, only to be attacked by the Apache once again. While that narrative splits between relocated townsfolk in a nearby cavalry fort, a posse dispatched to take revenge on the Apache attackers, and the Apache themselves, a parallel plot follows an abused woman on the run from her gang leader husband, with her violent in-laws in pursuit, and a rider unintentionally dragged into her plight. That forms easily enough content for a 3-hour feature, yet Costner also adds the story of a wagon train rolling through the wilderness at the 2/3 mark, which overloads the picture and exhausts the audience. This seems to come at the expense of the film's Apache characters, who simply get squeezed out of their own story. Frustrates, and it does so particularly because on a scene-by-scene basis, this is top-notch stuff. These individual scenes are longer in duration than the viewer is used to. It all runs with a measured pace that enhances character and atmosphere and gives time for the actors' performances to flourish. It is a great cast of often underrated talent as well, including the likes of Michael Rooker, Sam Worthington, Sienna Miller, Gina Malone, Abby Lee, Will Patton, Luke Wilson, and of course Costner himself. Were this a limited television series, it would be showered with awards. As a film, and much to my irritation now that I'm hooked in, it very likely is not even going to have an ending. As with Wes Anderson's playfully oversaturated Asteroid City, Kevin Costner's Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1, has made a name for itself pre-release. Out of context on the internet, its frames seem garish, overcooked, even tasteless. The flushed color for both films is alarming when experienced as furling frames of hot-washed landscapes in trailers that find us between our friends' posts mid-doom scroll. But the siloed and deliberated delivery of a film has long been a core tenet of cinema. Christopher Nolan invoked on purpose, our most popular martyr for the cause, a portal that ushers us into the director's world. Cinematic frames, cinematic sound, cinematic language, they need cinematic staging, aka the theater, or at least a theatrical home viewing, to be experienced. Golden light splaying across a gaping morning gorge just doesn't hit on YouTube, nor do the falling flakes of snow-blue Montana mountains in a flurry, nor the brushed grasses of vast prairies bent by perennial wind. But in the theater, Costner's mammoth vision of frontier America can be breathtaking. Horizon, An American Saga. Chapter 1's plot is anything but straightforward. The film made up of 3, arguably 4 stories, trying to shoulder and set up the narrative weight of a 4-part, 12-hour cinematic event well enough with one movie in order to warrant the rest. It's spread a bit thin, but not distractingly so if you anticipate the stories as parts of a whole. Through episodic logic, Costner and co-screenwriter John Baird balance the film quite well. It's 1859, and the stories are split into 3 locations: the San Pedro River Valley, home to the new settlement of Horizon, the Montana-Wyoming Mountain Range territory, and western Kansas on the Santa Fe Trail. In the first, new settlers struggle to fend off Native Americans protecting their land. In the third, we follow a wagon train of new Americans trekking across the country, Costner's penchant for Western realism, making entertainment out of everyday frustrations of the 19th century, like when drinking water is used as bath water, and vice versa. The fourth story concerns the Native Americans occupying the lands near the new settlement, but it isn't given the time of day. Hopefully future installments will level that out. Costner leads the second story as a bad boy gunman grifter who can't shake the ladies, wants help from no one, and goes by Hayes like Costner's son, who, in a roundabout way, was named after this character. In other words, Costner has been trying to get Horizon made since long before his son was born. A megalopolis-sized endeavor for the multi-hyphenate, the only kind he cares to take on. Getting the first 3 parts made has cost Costner $98 million out of pocket so far, which has required him to relinquish a lot of his assets. I don't need 4 homes. I'll risk those homes to make my movies. I want to leave them to my children, but my children will have to live their own lives, Costner said plainly at the Cannes press conference the morning after the premiere. Homeric undertakings such as these are the defining career trend for Costner, whose ambition as a director is the only thing that outperforms his charm as an actor. The epic, Oscar-sweeping Dances with Wolves infamously took Best Picture over Goodfellas, setting the filmmaker up for directorial success. But the back-to-back bombs, also of Homeric proportions, that were Waterworld, which Costner more or less directed, he had the power to fire the director, and he did, and The Postman left Costner in the dust. His third Open Range marked a strong yet much quieter effort before he left directing behind entirely, or so it seemed. With Horizon, he aims to more than double his directorial filmography and add his first 4 screenwriting credits to his tool belt. As the first film he's directed in 21 years, Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1 runs right down the middle of Costner's career obsessions, both in story makeup and the characters he writes for himself. Dances with Wolves, The Postman, and Open Range all reside in the American West sans modern civilization, with nomadic men by choice, roaming sweeping landscapes with even more sweeping orchestral scores, combining Western realism with storybook idealism. His first 2 films also sat at 3 hours, just like Horizon, An American Saga, Chapter 1, and JFK and Wyatt Earp, The Man Loves an Epic Scope. Kevin Costner returns to the Grand American West in first trailer for Horizon, An American Saga. On the less appealing side, but genuinely funny enough to negate that, of Costner's obsessions is his swooning infatuation with himself, which is always on full display. He's made sure he ends up opposite the hottest people in the world, and he's written them to drool over him the second he walks into town. The cherry on top is how calloused Hayes is written to be to the most beautiful women in town. "Oh, Christ," he keeps proclaiming when the ladies openly pine for his rugged, well-meaning Western way and presumably good dick and protection. Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1 is a fawning tribute to the good boys of the American West, of which there are many here. Sam Worthington, Michael Rooker, and Luke Wilson's characters all brandish their soul of honor, a phrase that rightly got giggles from the crowd, as Francis Kittredge, Sienna Miller, calls it. Danny Huston is great in a brief officer role, channeling his father's gruff Western demeanor and wise-talking grovel. Even bad boy Costner can't help but listen to his conscience, his dark past only peeking out in oral legends and a chronic resting bitch face, a visage he somehow wears softly, a testament to his charm. On the other side, to accentuate the goodness, the villains are vile. Jamie Campbell Bower puts on a display of evil odious enough to actually taste bad. The most reliable thing going into any Costner movie is and always has been his true blue earnestness, the most bankable quality of a star that made a name on tractor-beaming audiences in the 80s and 90s with sheer, indisputable sincerity. He's ridden the waves of flops that have aged in the public's favor over the years, largely due to their fetching Costner charm, one that worms its way into your good graces by taking itself so seriously that you ultimately don't have to. As with so many Costner vehicles in the past, it's hard to imagine someone losing interest in Horizon and American Saga, Chapter 1, once they've gained it. The frenetic pace of story, plus the prestige melodrama mood of the early 90s, that Costner hasn't lost touch with at all, still combining with magnetizing effect. We largely lost taste for it at the time, but in 2024, it feels like a relic of an aesthetic past, vintage cinematic toning. As with any strong Western, Horizon's boundless landscapes are used as tools of an existential triggering reflection on so many levels, it's hard to know where to begin, or where to let your mind roam off to. It reflects loneliness and progress, the most essential elements of survival and the most frivolous, where we've come from and where we'll likely end up, as the postman would have it. It keeps the mind moving even when things are still. Yet, Costner ditches his staple prestige style when it comes to violence, trading Oscar-bait beats of emotion for graphic, more contemporary instances of starkly seen violence, women and children not spared by the camera's crosshairs. It's a riveting turn for the actor as filmmaker, and one he seems to have a good grip on. It's certainly something to look forward to in the coming installments. But as for Kevin Costner's break back into cinema, as Horizon and American Saga, Chapter 1 has made itself out to be, the influence of modern TV, specifically Yellowstone, makes Horizon look like TV's baby brother, one trying to get out of its shadow and carve its own path. The most glaring evidence is its episodic narrative, no doubt a selling point for Costner in the fundraising phase. Just imagine how well this translates to streaming. In essence, they could play it for both. It has the scope, the craftsmanship, the movie-grade performances, the look, and the distribution of cinema. But it has the delivery potential, 3 one-hour sections perfect for a streaming format, and built-in approachability of TV. The great news for anyone who loves Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 is that Chapter 2 is right around the corner, arriving in theaters in August, only 6 weeks after the release of the first. And the best news is that Chapter 3 and Chapter 4 are in the batter's box, the former already underway and the latter waiting for its predecessors to knock the ball out the park so it can step up to the production plate. The movie won by an Apache War Chief Gregory Cruz and won by OS Caval Officer Danny Huston that addressed the fundamental issue of the indigenous tribes trying to stop what they call the white eye settlers who've invaded their land, and both speeches weirdly make the same point that even if the native people are justified, and even if they keep trying to fight the settlers, they're doomed to lose the settlers will keep coming. History is not on the native side. This seems an awfully definitive vision to hold in 1859. And while Costner doesn't seem unsympathetic to his native characters, It's not clear as of now how much they'll take on a life of their own. The film hopscotches to a ramshackle town, where Marigold A.B.Y. Lee, a perky prostitute in blonde ringlets, is caring for the illegitimate son of Lucy Gina. Malone, who has abandoned her family after trying to kill the man who made her pregnant, his 2 adult sons. Their names are Junior John Beavers and Caleb Jamie Campbell Bauer. Though you can just call them Mean and Meaner, go looking for her, but it's to their misfortune that Marigold, the boy's caretaker, how did she become his caretaker? That's one of several scenes that seem to be on the cutting room floor. Meets Hayes Ellison Sr., who with his mustache and hat and laconic manner, and Colt 45 is the closest we're going to get to Gary Cooper Sr. Makes him a man of few words, and his face-off against the taunting Caleb is a nice bit of staging. What a real show shootout. Probably looked like hay, and Marigold looked like they're destined to become a couple. And then at a certain point it seems like they are a couple. Fine, but did we miss something? There are also scenes set on a covered wagon trail that center on the Proctors and feat English couple who've joined the westward movement. They have a very naive and almost charmingly entitled attitude. They don't realize that they have to work to that the other. Settlers are not their servants, but Matthew Van Wen, the leader of the wagon train, sets them straight. He's played by Luke Wilson, who is very good, shaking off any semblance of his usual irony. Meanwhile, Frances and her daughter wind up being taken care of at Ace Army encampment, where First Lieutenant Trent, Jeff Art, Sam Worthington attracts Frances' attention by being both handsome and too gentlemanly for his own good. Few of these characters are interesting. None of them are memorable. Verizon is no. Lonesome Dove, though Costner tries and mostly succeeds at setting aside Western cliches about what towns really look like and how frontier life worked the gap. Real problem is the script by Costner and John B., which is shapeless. It doesn't weave these stories together. It stacks them next to each other like a series of cabos. Yet I think the idea is that the design of it all will come into focus as we see Horizon, an American Saga chapter 2 later this summer, and then at some point chapter 3, which is now scheduled. And maybe if all goes according to plan, more chapters. I seriously hope not. I'm not sure how much juice there is to squeeze out of these characters, but even if there is some I don't want to see. Movies turn into television. Just about every Western of the studio era came in at 2 hours or less, and so did most of that. The revisionist Westerns, and some of those were complicated. There's a reason for that. It's all the time they needed. Positive elements as these interwoven stories unfold. It's strongly implied that the savagery on both sides of this native and settler conflict could have been avoided with clearer minds and better communication. Both sides have good and kind-natured individuals who call for understanding, but they are overridden by those with an angry bloodlust and/or a lust for money. When we meet Hayes Ellison, he's trying to make his way in the West. Hayes definitely has his flaws, but he decides to protect a woman and a child he doesn't know after a gunfight that he was a part of puts them in danger. He's willing to protect them, and he works on their behalf so they can go somewhere safe. Lizzie, a teen. Horizon survivor, is sweet and kind. She meets a couple of Army cadets who are happy to help her, and when those young men are sent away on a mission, she gives them small cloth flowers, ours to remember her by. The boys are so moved by her action that the sergeant in charge asks that Lizzie give tokens to each of the young men in the small group under his charge. Some will fight and die. Holding on to that, it'll mean that much. The sergeant tells Liz's mom spiritual elements when soldiers from a local fort show up to help the Horizon survivors. They talk to some of the younger kids about their dead parents, going to their reward, and being called by their father. We see one family reading scripture together during the bloody Horizon attack. Amazing Grace is sung during the closing credits. An Apache elder gives a small totem to his young son, saying that he can talk to it for guidance. Sexual content several different women display. Cleavage, a prostitute sits on a windowsill in a bustier, nearly exposes one. Breast, the camera gazes down over her shoulder. A woman named Marigold attempts to seduce men to have sex with her. And we see her with two different men. One, she straddles while clothed. The other we see with her as they are dressing. She reveals her bare back and part of her breast, a young wife in a wagon train, bathes herself at night with a cloth and a pitcher of water. She slowly wipes herself down. Her legs, upper body, and chest are exposed, while the camera and two nearby men watch closely. Francis Kittredge and an army officer named Jeff Art are attracted to each other, but he's reluctant to express that attraction. So she prompts the issue with small verbal encouragements, a kiss on the cheek, and then a kiss on the lips, violent content. There's quite a bit of bloodletting in the mix here. A huge attack on a settlement, for instance, features tents and buildings being set aflame, while Apache warriors attack and butcher the white and black residents. Women and children are hit in the head and face by tomahawks. People are shot in the chest and head with arrows and bullets, some in execution-style shots that splatter blood on others' scalps are cut from people's heads. The battle is intense and gory. We see images of dead adults and children. Young Lizzie then has to identify her dead father and brother in a brutally emotional scene. Later, Pan displays his collected white scalps to his tribe. In response, white hunters track down an innocent Indian tribe and attack after the male adults have left. They hack and shoot at the women and teens left behind, ripping and sawing scalps just off camera. It's all the more brutal and unnerving in the daylight, and then the scalp collectors line up their bloody rewards on a table. A man gets shot twice in the chest with a shotgun. Another person has his fingers blown off. A family gathers together to pray, and when their attackers leap into their tent, they light a gunpowder pot that explodes in a huge fiery eruption. We see people pouring lye on the bodies of the gods. Deceased Francis and Lizzie crawl into a small, crumbling passageway beneath their burning house and nearly choked to death from the falling dirt and smoke. A man is thou. Pistol whipped so badly that he falls to the ground and bleeds out. A woman is punched in the face by a large man, leaving her face swollen and bruised too. Men get into an impromptu gunfight, and one is shot down with 4 bullets to the chest. A horse falls over from heat. Exhaustion. A boy is given a pistol and spurred to shoot an innocent man, though he refuses. People get stabbed with knives and a spear. Crude or profane language. There's one's word A, use of A, and 3 uses of H in the dialogue, along with nearly 20 exclamations of Jesus and God's names. God is blended with DN in 10 of those instances. Drug and alcohol content. A woman smokes a cigarette. An army sergeant drinks a glass of whiskey, and 2 men share a swig each from a small bottle of booze. Someone carries a picnic basket that contains a bottle of alcohol. Other negative elements. A number of people lie and cheat to get what they want. A man urinate into a ditch in front of several people. Conclusion. Horizon, an American Saga, is writer-director, SL actor Kevin Costner's passion project, a How the West Was Won like epic tale that's intended to stretch through 4 films. But quite frankly, this first film's powder is pretty wet, don't get me wrong. Costner has a real skill for crafting the look and feel of an old-school Western. The cinematography here is gorgeous, and the many characters seem authentically depicted for the Civil War time period. This story commences in 1861, just as the Civil War does. But there are too many scattered pieces. The multiple disjointed and choppy storylines, plot threads that limp and stumble like a lame horse on rocky terrain, make this narrative's characters tough to invest in. Nair himself doesn't even show up until an hour into this oddly balanced film, even when he does. The storytelling is talky and banal. Oh, and those ambling tales don't wrap anything up by the end of the first 3-hour stretch. They don't even leave you with a decent Western cliffhanger at all. Just peters out with what amounts to brief clips of what's to come. For that matter, the ab-mentioned misfires don't Even take into account the bloody visuals, rough language, and brief nudity that will keep family audiences away. From this intentionally gritty R-rated historical drama may be Horizon's tale. We'll start to caner smoothly by the second chapter that's set to release in August of this year, but right now it's rough enough and raw enough to be a difficult ride on a bony and less than family-friendly horse. What you need to know: Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1 is a sprawling Western epic starring and directed by Kevin. A group of settlers starts a small community in the Southwest Territory near a land. The chief's angry son attacks the settlers in a murder raid. A big battle ensues. The U.S. Army advises the survivors to come live at the fort because their town is too far away to protect. Meanwhile, enticed by a flyer about the town called Horizon, a large wagon train travels southwest toward Horizon. Finally, a cowpoke gunfighter ends up protecting a young woman and the baby of her kidnapped friend who's presumed dead, though they flee the baby's angry patriarchal family by heading southwest. Chapter 1 of Horizon presents an impressive, spectacular vision with exciting, engaging action. It also has several moving moments among some of the characters. The movie takes a pretty even-handed attitude toward the settlers and the Apaches. However, Chapter 1 of Horizon has intense violence, strong foul language, a brief scene of nudity, and a partially depicted bedroom scene. Chapter 2 is being released August 16th. Content dominant worldview and other worldview. Contentment's moral worldview with some brief Christian content about settlers of all stripes and from all multiple backgrounds entering and traveling to the Southwest Territory to pursue a better life, with a positive depiction of the U.S. Army. But not all the settlers have good intentions. Foul language 14. Obscenities, no F words, 4 Jesus profanities, 12 GD profanities, and 5 light profanities. Violence, strong, sometimes intense violence, as woman shoots her abusive husband with a shotgun and rides away with their young child. He survives and orders his 2 sons to hunt her down and return with the child. One of the brothers pursuing the woman eventually kills her new husband after luring the couple away from town and goes looking for the child in town. Man comes upon the bodies of 3 dead surveyors and buries the bodies. Apache Indians attack the people in a tent city erected on their land. Indians shoot arrows and bash people with tomahawks. A big battle ensues there. Indians attack a family's nearby cabin where some of the settlers have fled, and a long battle ensues there. A gunfight occurs to 2 men. One of the brothers pursuing the woman kill her husband, and settlers from the 10th city come upon and small Indian village and kill the people out of revenge, plus taking some Indian scalps that they can sell for money. But a teenage boy with them is sickened by their behavior. More detail. Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1 is a sprawling Western epic starring and directed by Kevin Costner about a Western town trying to get started in the Southwest Territory, the people, and settlers striving to come there, including their trials and the Apache Indians trying to deal with it all in good ways and bad ways. The first of 2 movies, Chapter 1 of Horizon, and immerses viewers in a spectacular, impressive vision of the Wild West, but there are violent scenes of Apache attacking many settlers in a murder raid. Settlers seeking bloody revenge and gunfights, plus strong foul language, brief nudity when a woman on a wagon train takes a bath, and 2 brief scenes of a loose woman with 2 separate men. The movie opens with 3 surveyors, including a young boy, staking out the land for a new settlement along a river. In the Southwest Territory, presumably on the Mexican side, they carry with them a flyer about a new settlement called Horizon. A band of Indians arrive and confront them. Cut 2. A man coming upon the 3 dead bodies. He buries them on the Mexican side of the river by a small tree. However, he sees another more foam tree on the American side of the border 4 years. Later, in 1863, the settlement of Horizon has grown into a tent city. Several families, however, have built cabins on the hill overlooking the tent city, in the large tent in the middle of town. The people are enjoying a community dance. Suddenly, as the sun sets, a bunch of Apache Indians attack the town. A big battle ensues, with the Apaches killing many. Settlers in cold blood, with their bows and tomahawks, the settlers fight back. However, only a few survive, including a newly widowed woman, Frances, and her 15-year-old daughter, a few men and other family members, and a boy who brings back troops from nearby Fort Gallant. The next day, the officer leading the troops, Lieutenant Trent Giffart, tells the survivors their settlement is too far away for him to provide any protection. He advises them to come to live at or near the fort instead. When some of the survivors complain, he points to the 3 graves on the other side of the river, telling them that should have given them a clue about the dangers of living in this location. Frances decides to stay at the fort with her daughter, but a group of men decide to go out hunting for the Apaches that killed their families and friends. The boy who brought in the troops from Fort Gallant decides to go with him. He too wants revenge against the Indians who murdered his family. Meanwhile, the wise Apache chief, whose tribe has made a home in the nearby mountains, is upset that his eldest son, Pan, led the murderous raid on the settlers of Horizon. He tells Pan he's fighting a losing battle, but Pan doesn't agree, so Pan leaves the tribe with his men to wage war against the white people. The chief's younger son decides to go with his brother, leaving the chief sad but proud of his sons for knowing who they are. At the same time, or shortly thereafter, a large wagon train of people is heading toward Horizon looking for a better future. They've been attracted by all the flyers put out about the place offering free land. Matthew, the leader of the wagon train, has a tough time wrangling the different personalities in the wagon train. He doesn't want any trouble because all he wants is to get as many people he can as far as he can as the wagon train moves inexorably slowly forward. 14 hours a day back at the Fort, Frances slowly begins a tentative romance with Lieutenant Jeff. At the same time, a woman named Lucy has changed her name to Ellen after wounding her abusive husband in Montana, taking their child and finding refuge in a small mountain town in Wyoming. Ellen has married an ambitious young man, but to survive, they live with a young female boarder, Marigold, or Mary, who seduces local men in town for money and helps with the baby. However, Ellen's former husband has sent his 2 sons, the hatty-headed Caleb and his stronger, older, more level-headed brother, Junior Sykes, to locate and bring back Ellen, and the baby. Ellen and her new husband think they're going to hash out a lucrative real estate deal with a stranger. But the stranger turns out to be Junior, after Caleb murders Ellen's husband. Junior sends Caleb into town to locate Ellen's child before going to take care of Ellen's baby. Mary goes into town and entices Hay Alliston, a visiting cowpoke and gunfighter, to visit her later in the cabin while Ellen and her husband are gone. Hayes debates whether to take up Mary's offer or visit the local Brell. He decides to visit Mary, but gets a shave and bath before he leaves town. However, on the way up the hill to the cabin, Hayes runs into Caleb. The encounter doesn't end well, and Hayes finds himself on the run with Mary and the baby from the vengeful Sykes family. They head for the Southwest Territory. Chapter 1 of Horizon presents an impressive, spectacular vision. It also has some moving moments. One of the best is Frances' teenage daughter giving mementos to some Army troops heading back east to defend the Union in the ongoing Civil War. That said, a few of the movie's transitions are too abrupt. Despite the multiple storylines, the movie connects the characters and their stories by the flyer enticing people to come settle in Horizon. The flyers are selling a dream, and that dream is what is drawing the people westward. Although Horizon is sympathetic to the dilemma the Indians are facing with the hordes of settlers heading west, it's not too woke. It also sides with the settlers being attacked and the settlers heading toward Horizon to seek a better life. Whether this will continue in Chapter 2. Scheduled to debut on August 16th is anyone's guess. Much has been written. And the European settlers, marshals, and American soldiers who tamed the Wild West in recent years. There has been some revisionist history, however, that puts lots of blame on white settlers and lifts blame off the American Indians. There was brutality on both sides. However, also some of the alleged massacres by Indians were false, and some of the alleged massacres by American troops were false. For example, when a tribal police officer killed Sitting Bull on the Sioux Reservation in 1890, one of Sitting Bull's men fired. First, he shot and mortally wounded the Indian officer trying to arrest Sitting Bull, but the officer shot Sitting Bull dead before the officer hit the ground. Historian Jeff Finn, Paul restores some balance to the historical record in his 2023 book, Not Stolen, This Film, directed by Kevin, screenplay by John B. Kevin, story by John Bar Kevin Sinner. Mark Kasdan, produced by Kevin Nur, Howard Kaplan, Mark Gillard, starring Kevin Cheener, Sienna Miller, Sam Worthington, Joanne Ribsey. Cinematography, J. Michael Muro, edited by Miklo Wright, music by John Debney. Production company Territory Pictures, distributed by New Line Cinema K5. International release dates, May 9, 2024 in Cannes, June 28, 2024 in United States. Running time, 181 minutes, country United. States language, English. Budget, $501,100. Million box office, $17.2 million. So guys, this is the review of Horizon, an American Saga, Chapter 1 movie, and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it.